You know who really did something awesome recently? Boots Riley. So, full disclaimer, I'm a Boots Riley fan. I like Boots Riley a lot. I like his work, and I like his views. And Boots Riley, for the first time, is going to be voting for a presidential candidate in 2020, at least according to him. He's never supported a presidential candidate before. Check this out. We're going to read this thread because it's incredible. I've never voted for a candidate in my life. Now, full disclaimer, I don't know Boots Riley personally, so I don't know if he means that literally, like he's never voted before, or if he means kind of like metaphorically, like he's never voted for an actual candidate. He's just voted against other candidates. I don't know. It doesn't really matter, but here's the thread nonetheless. I've never voted for a candidate in my life, but I will be voting for Bernie Sanders in the Democratic primary and the general election. If I'm doing that, there are probably tens of millions in that same position. Let me explain why I'm doing this now. I've spoken out many times over the years about the dangers that electoral politics hold for mass movements. Reducing involvement to this one moment, this one person, and making it unclear to masses of people that power under capitalism comes at the point of exploitation. That politicians are beholden to the ruling class, not simply due to campaign financing, although that's a big part of it, but they are beholden to those who wield power through control of the economy. By taking the wealth that we create with our labor and controlling industry, controlling markets, and that elections often leave people feeling disempowered after. If their candidate wins, people take a let's wait and see attitude. If their candidate loses, people either wait for or organize for the next election. Never creating a mass movement at the point of contradiction under capitalism, which would mean organizing on the job. I believe that we need a world in which people democratically control the wealth that we create with our labor. This would be real, actual power in the hands of the people, actual democracy. You can call that communism, you can call it socialism, you can call it pancakes. I don't give a fuck what you call it. But that's the world that we need. We have a new era in the movements we see growing in the US. If you account for the folks that wouldn't say that to a stranger on the phone, I bet those numbers are even higher. 51% of millennials would prefer socialism. 43% of all ages prefer socialism. Over the past 20 years, we've seen things like the anti-Iraq war movement mobilize literal millions of people onto the streets all over the world, but was unable to stop the war. We learned that power cannot be simply shamed into capitulating to the demands of the people. We've seen the Occupy movement come along and surprise everyone. In every town and city in the U.S. where there was an Occupy encampment that put the closest thing to the class analysis we've seen in the mass media, the 1% versus the 99%. Studies showed that before Occupy, mainstream news had only dared utter the word capitalism less than a handful of times in the 20 years before. After that, for at least a short period of time, it was being uttered several times a day. And although the encampments were a small percentage of the population, there was a large percentage who saw the encampments and agreed. We've also seen the Black Lives Matter movement grow and respond to the epidemic of cops killing black folks, and also learning the people that make the decisions governing our lives don't change their actions simply because they know that the community is upset. We must have movements with teeth, one that are able to force the hands of power. Over the past few years, we've seen a sharp rise in people organizing on the job. I don't just mean traditional labor unions, although those unions are growing faster. I'm also talking about everything from previously unorganized retail workers, baristas, rideshare workers, grad student workers, farm workers, etc. We've seen strikes. We're going to have strategic targeted and general strikes to force the hand of the folks who have some of these politicians in their pockets. Imagine BART or transit workers striking till Pelosi commits to Medicare for all, or West Virginia teachers striking to force the vote of Joe Manchin. In order to get some of the reforms that Bernie Sanders' campaign platform calls for, Medicare for all, the Green New Deal, free university, and trade school tuition, it's going to take movement tactics. If we have a movement that can shut down industries through the withholding of labor, we can make politicians do what we want. We're going to need radicals to get us there. I'm voting for Bernie Sanders because I don't disagree with him. I'm not voting for Bernie because I don't disagree with him on things. Venezuela, for instance. Nor do I believe that the reforms he proposes will be the socialist world that we need. What I am doing is endorsing the movement that has grown around him. That involves millions of people who are willing to consciously and openly engage in class struggle in order to make these reforms happen. These struggles will radicalize millions of people and has the potential to organize the working class in the U.S. to a point we haven't seen before. We keep going from there. Brilliant. I didn't read the whole thing, obviously, because it's very long, but I recommend checking that out on Twitter. It's Boots Riley on Twitter. I'm sure you already know who that is. You don't need to hear it from me, but it's at Boots Riley on Twitter. And I think to summarize what he's saying, a very kind of nuts and bolts summary, is that it takes a movement for change in this country. Electoral politics is just one vehicle, and in many ways a small vehicle at that. But having someone in the White House with a platform that really moves us forward, which is what we would have with Bernie Sanders, our movement is that much more powerful. And that's why Boots Riley is supporting Bernie Sanders. That's why I am supporting Bernie Sanders. And again, something else that I think Boots gets at here that we talk about on this show, Bernie will only be as effective of a president as the movement behind him is. If Bernie gets in the White House and we all go to brunch because we feel like we solved it all, I'm not saying don't celebrate for a night. Believe me. Like I said, if Bernie doesn't win, putting on the yellow vest immediately. If Bernie does win, I'm going to celebrate for 2 nights. Then I'm putting on the yellow vest. Because we will need to do things like what Boots talks about. We will need to do things like go on strike until Nancy Pelosi commits to Medicare for all. We will need to do things like protest in the streets until people like Joe Manchin and everyone else commits to a Green New Deal. Bernie's going to need to have to, he's going to have to look out the window and see us there. And he needs to be able to point to his colleagues and be like, you see them? That's who I work for. That's who put me in this seat. And these are their demands. Similar to the way FDR approached his rich friends. And he said, you see them out there? They're pissed. So you're either going to give up some of your money or you're going to give up all of it. Make your fucking choice. So I think Boots nails it. Big time. And God, I really want to get him on my Sounds of Revolution interview series. If you feel like tweeting Boots Riley and recommending that, it couldn't hurt. Couldn't hurt. If you don't mind doing that for Ron, couldn't hurt. Couldn't hurt. I will, of course, reach out to him. I don't know if he'll say yes. But man, he's on my list. I mean, I made a dream wish list, and some of you guys helped with that wish list. Which, by the way, thank you for that. And of course, Boots Riley is on it. Man, I really want to get him for a Sounds of Revolution interview series. But here you have Boots Riley recognizing what a Bernie Sanders in the White House would do, and what it means in regards to the movement, a movement for a better tomorrow. And hopefully, we get to talk to him about it. Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed.
Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. You can tweet me an article at Ron Placone. We'll go through it together and make it our own. Get your